It was a moonless night, and the wind whispered secrets through the rustling leaves outside my friend Sarah's house. We had gathered for a sleepover, excited for a night of laughter and tales. But little did we know, the night would take a chilling turn. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, we huddled in sleeping bags in the dimly lit living room. Sarah began to share a ghost story she claimed was true, the tale of the silent woman. Legend had it that she wandered the nearby woods, her face concealed by a veil, and anyone who heard her cries met a terrible fate. Laughter and skepticism filled the room until we heard it, a faint, mournful wail that sent shivers down our spines. We dismissed it as the wind or an animal, but unease lingered. The next sound was unmistakable, a soft, deliberate whisper right behind us. We turned to see a shadowy figure, veiled in darkness, standing in the doorway. Frozen in terror, we watched as the figure drew nearer. It was a woman, her face hidden behind a tattered, blood-stained veil. Her eyes were pools of darkness, and she moved with an eerie, unnatural grace. She held out a trembling hand, and her voice, barely audible, begged for our help. Sarah, driven by compassion, stepped forward to assist the woman. But as soon as she touched her hand, the room plunged into darkness. The only sound was Sarah's terrified scream, followed by a sickening thud. Panic engulfed us as we fumbled for our flashlights. When we finally found them, we saw an empty room, devoid of Sarah and the silent woman. Desperation fueled our search, but there was no trace of them. We called the police, who conducted an exhaustive search of the woods, but there was no sign of Sarah. The ordeal left us traumatized, haunted by the ghostly encounter in that fateful sleepover. Months later, a package arrived at my doorstep, an old, weathered veil. It bore a chilling note: "You should have helped." I knew then that the silent woman was not done with us. To this day, I lay awake at night, haunted by the memory of that sleepover, the night when a true horror emerged from the darkness, reminding us that some legends are far more real than we dare to believe. It was a chilly October night when my friends and I decided to have a sleepover at my grandparents' old farmhouse. Nestled deep in the woods, the creaky old house had an eerie charm that was hard to resist. Little did we know, the night would turn into a harrowing ordeal. As we settled in the dimly lit living room, my friend Mike suggested that we try a seance to communicate with spirits. Excitement and nervous laughter filled the room as we formed a circle and placed our hands on a makeshift Ouija board. The planchette moved with an unnatural force, spelling out chilling messages and responding to our questions. We thought it was a prank, but the atmosphere grew increasingly tense, and a sense of foreboding took hold. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. Panic surged through us as we fumbled for our flashlights. In the darkness, I heard whispers that were not our own. They were hushed, incoherent, and came from all directions. Then, the temperature plummeted and an icy gust swept through the room. Our breath formed ghostly puffs in the frigid air. Desperation filled us as we realized something was terribly wrong. We tried to leave the room, but the door was jammed shut. The whispers grew louder, more malevolent, as if they were closing in on us. Shadows danced on the walls, their forms grotesque and unsettling. In the midst of our terror, a figure materialized before us, an apparition with hollow eyes and a gaping maw. It reached out with bony, skeletal fingers, and we screamed in unison. As suddenly as it appeared, the figure vanished, leaving us shaken and gasping for breath. The lights flickered back to life, and the door swung open as if by an invisible hand. We fled the farmhouse in a frenzy, not looking back. As we stumbled into the cold night, we could still hear the whispers echoing from within. We never returned to that accursed place. Years have passed, but the memory of that sleepover still haunts me. We had unwittingly stirred something malevolent that night, something that defied explanation. It served as a chilling reminder that in the dark corners of the world, there are forces beyond our comprehension, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. As the night fell, my friends and I decided to have a sleepover at my family's remote cabin deep in the woods. The cabin had always felt isolated and eerie, but we brushed aside any fears, excited for a night of fun and laughter. Little did we know that our innocence would be shattered that night. The cabin was cozy, lit only by a crackling fireplace, and the wind outside whispered secrets that sent shivers down our spines. We played games and told ghost stories, relishing the thrill of fear. It wasn't long before the conversation turned to urban legends, and we began sharing tales of the cabin's dark history. Then, as the clock struck midnight, we heard a sound, a soft, faint tapping coming from the window. At first, we dismissed it as a branch or a curious animal, but the tapping persisted, growing more insistent with each passing moment. We gathered at the window and peered outside, our breath forming frosty clouds in the chill night air. To our horror, we saw a figure, a gaunt, pale face pressed against the glass, eyes wide and unblinking. A scream tore through the room as we stumbled backward, our hearts racing. The figure, uninvited and unknown, stared at us with an intensity that sent fear coursing through our veins. It didn't move, didn't speak. It just watched us with an eerie, unsettling fascination. Desperation gripped us as we tried to contact the authorities, but the cabin's remote location left us with no cell signal. We were trapped, alone with this intruder, and our fear escalated into a maddening frenzy. As the minutes turned into hours, the figure outside seemed to multiply, pressing against every window, watching us with those unrelenting eyes. We huddled together, clutching makeshift weapons, our voices trembling as we whispered frantic plans to escape. Then, just as dawn began to break, the figure vanished. We cautiously approached the windows, finding nothing but the dim light of morning. Relief washed over us, but it was short-lived. We later discovered an old journal hidden in the cabin's attic. It told a chilling tale of a hermit who had once lived in these woods, driven mad by isolation and darkness. He had died, or so the journal said, but his spirit was said to haunt the cabin. To this day, the memory of that sleepover lingers, a reminder that darkness can lurk where we least expect it. We were uninvited guests in his world, and the horrors we witnessed that night were all too real.